When you stand at the edge of a lake, what do you see? A placid surface. It seems calm, simple. But if you could shrink down and slip beneath that surface, you would enter a world as complex and bustling as any city, a hidden metropolis operating on a set of rules we rarely ever see. This isn't just a body of water, it's a complete living ecosystem, a delicate environment where every single part, no matter how small, has a critical role to play. Let's dive in. The first citizens you'd meet in this underwater world are the producers. These are the power plants of the lake. They're primarily made up of phytoplankton, countless species of microscopic algae and cyanobacteria, each one a tiny floating solar panel. Along with the rooted aquatic plants in the shallows, they perform a kind of everyday magic, photosynthesis. They capture the raw energy of sunlight and convert it into sugars, into life. They are the absolute foundation. Without them, the lake's entire economy collapses. Every ounce of energy that will eventually feed the largest fish begins here, as a single photon of light captured by a microscopic speck of green. Once that energy is captured, it needs to move, and that's where the consumers come in. Think of them as the various industries and workers of the lake city. The first on the scene are the primary consumers, and the most important of these are zooplankton. These are tiny, often microscopic animals that drift through the water, grazing on the vast array of phytoplankton. They are the lake's shepherds, keeping the algal meadows from growing out of control. But they're more than just grazers. They are also the lake's cleanup crew, consuming organic debris that settles from above. These tiny creatures are dual heroes, maintaining water clarity by eating algae and recycling waste from the sediment. Of course, the zooplankton aren't the only consumers. There are aquatic insects, small fish that dart through the water feeding on the zooplankton and insects, and then larger, predatory fish that hunt the smaller ones. Each level of consumer transfers that initial solar energy one step further up the chain, creating a complex web of interactions where everyone is both predator and prey. But what happens when all these organisms, the algae, the plants, the zooplankton, the fish, die? Does that energy just vanish? No. That's when the third group of citizens gets to work, the decomposers. This is the lake's sanitation and recycling department, an invisible army of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms that live in the water and especially in the sediment at the bottom. They are the ultimate recyclers. They break down dead plants and animals, dismantling complex organic material back into its fundamental building blocks, simple nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. These recycled nutrients are then released back into the water, ready to be used by the producers, the algae and plants, to start the whole cycle over again. They are the engine of renewal, ensuring nothing goes to waste. This flow of energy and nutrients creates a structure known as the food web, which is often visualized as a pyramid. At the broad base, you have the producers, all that algae and plant life holding a massive amount of energy from the sun. The next level up is much smaller, the primary consumers, the zooplankton, who eat the producers. Above them, a smaller level still, the secondary consumers, the small fish that eat the zooplankton. And at the very peak, the top predators, the large fish, the birds of prey, maybe an otter or an eagle, or a fisherman, that complete the chain. This structure isn't an accident, it's a law of nature. It takes a lot of algae to feed a few zooplankton, and a lot of zooplankton to feed one small fish. This structure is what keeps the ecosystem in balance. When it works, this food web is more than just a feeding hierarchy. It's a self-regulating biological cleanup system. The constant grazing by zooplankton keeps the algae populations from exploding. The feeding of small fish keeps the zooplankton communities healthy and active, and the top predators keep the smaller fish populations in check. Each level polices the one below it. In a healthy lake, this system filters the water naturally, maintaining a dynamic, stable balance and good water quality. But this whole machine is fueled by something we haven't talked much about yet: nutrients, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus. Think of them as the fertilizer for the lake. They enter the water from the surrounding land in watershed runoff, from rain and dust falling from the atmosphere, and critically, from the lake's own sediments. Algae absorb these nutrients to grow. It's a perfectly normal part of the cycle. When zooplankton eat the algae, they package those nutrients into waste pellets that sink to the bottom. Some of that gets trapped in the sediment, effectively taken out of the system. The rest is released back into the water by our friends, the decomposers, when they break down dead matter. This is called internal nutrient recycling. Here's where a crucial vulnerability appears. In the deep, dark parts of a lake, oxygen can get very low, especially in the summer. When that happens, a switch is flipped in the bottom sediments. Suddenly, the sediment releases all the phosphorus and nitrogen it had stored away. This is called internal loading. It's a massive, uncontrolled injection of fertilizer from the lake's own floor, which can fuel enormous new algae growth even if no new nutrients are flowing in from the watershed. This brings us to the fragile link between all this biology and the quality of the water itself. The zooplankton are a critical control point. As the lake's filter feeders, their population size directly impacts how much algae is in the water. If the zooplankton are abundant and healthy, the water stays clear. If their populations crash, algae can grow unchecked. And what controls the zooplankton? Firstly, sufficient oxygen in the water. When bottom water becomes hypoxic, benthic zooplankton that consume and clear organic detritus in the sediment die off, so that organic matter accumulates. As it decomposes, more oxygen is sucked out of the water. With less zooplankton to feed on and less oxygenated water to live in, the fish start to suffer. There's less grazing pressure on phytoplankton, and more nutrients recycled form the hypoxic sediment, so algae blooms. The lake turns green and murky. Small changes sent shockwaves all through the ecosystem, knocking it completely out of balance. This is why that balance is so profoundly important. A balanced lake is a resilient, beautiful system. It has clear water, diverse communities of algae, robust populations of zooplankton, healthy fish of all sizes, and active decomposers keeping the nutrient cycle stable. It can handle stress and bounce back from disturbances. But when that balance is disrupted, the system spirals. Algae populations surge into blooms. The water becomes turbid, blocking sunlight and killing off aquatic plants, which destroys habitat for fish. When the massive algal bloom eventually dies, it sinks to the bottom, creating a feast for decomposers. All that decomposition consumes huge amounts of oxygen from the deep water, creating the low oxygen conditions that cause the sediments to release even more nutrients. This feedback loop, more nutrients, more algae, more decomposition, less oxygen, and even more nutrients from the sediment, is a vicious cycle. It's a process called eutrophication, the rapid aging of a lake, and it can turn a vibrant ecosystem into a stressed, unstable, and unhealthy one. So, the next time you look out over a lake, remember the invisible city beneath the surface. It's a network built on the elegant interplay of producers creating energy, consumers moving it, and decomposers recycling the essential materials. It's a system where the health of the tiniest grazer can determine the clarity of the water, and the presence of a single top predator can stabilize the entire pyramid. When all these parts function together, the lake is healthy, resilient, and alive. But if one part weakens, the entire system can shift, reminding us that in nature, nothing, absolutely nothing, acts alone.
In Lesson 1, we learned about the anatomy of the lake. Now that we understand how the ecosystem should work, we must look at what happens when things go wrong. Join us for Lesson 3, How Lakes Start to Die, where we examine how a surplus of nutrients can cause this beautiful metropolis to spiral into decline and decay. To go to the next lesson, use the link below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.